you've called on Platner to step aside given some scandals, obviously his tattoo scandal and certain Reddit posts. You said that that's not who Mainers are. And one of the big stories that I think has come out from local press, which you have an active local press there, is that that's not necessarily how folks on the ground are responding. So I think just differentiate yourself from Graham Platner as the progressive standard bearer, perhaps, and also speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so Graham and I both would identify as progressives, and I
Mhm.
think from what I know of his policy positions, he's relatively new to the race. We have a lot of agreement. I think the difference is really in our backgrounds, in our experiences. I come from a very working class family in Maine, and that really informs the positions that I have. But also, I started working in community and political
By
organizing
the
in
way,
college.
would you say he doesn't? I know there's been a lot of sort of online discourse about his background. He has this sort of working class, you know, at least image that some people have glommed onto. I actually, preparing for this interview, looked into your background and thought it was interesting that, it hasn't been necessarily a narrative attached to your campaign. Is it sort of are biases playing in here to what people expect a working class candidate to look like and sound like? And how much does it actually have to do with how you grew up in the history there?
Yeah, I think that I think it does that I don't come off that way. Although I talk about these experiences pretty extensively on the campaign. I think in Maine, being from Lewiston and Gardner, where I grew up, that has a lot of cultural connotations. These are very working class towns. People in Maine get that. I think that that's lost with a national audience, which is,
Okay.
there's a lot of national attention on a race. Graham, and I don't know all about his childhood, but he was born and raised in Blue Hill, which is a wealthy enclave on the coast of Maine that voted for Joe Biden by 35 points. So
Okay.
he went to Hotchkiss prep school, which, as I understand it, costs north of $50,000 to attend. His father is a lawyer, so I don't, and I haven't heard him talk about, to his credit, having much of a disadvantaged childhood. More later in life, I think it is. So, I there are differences there, and I talked about the need for the Democratic Party to go back to the party that I knew it to be as a child, which is my grandmother was born into extreme poverty
Mhm.
in the South. She started picking cotton when she was 12 years old, and she died at 96 several years ago, and would proudly say she had never in her life voted for a Republican. And the reason for that was that she knew which party was lifting families like ours out of poverty into the middle class because of reforms that were championed by people like FDR and LBJ that created
Mhm.
Social Security and Medicare, that empowered unions. So that's the party that I want the Democratic Party to be again. I want to again be the party where low income families see us as the hope for the future that's going to improve their lives. And so Graham and I, again, I think there's agreement here on some of the big policy reforms that are needed, the need for next generation of leaders to step forward.
Mhm.
But I have worked in and around Congress for over a decade. This campaign talks about the rigged political system and the need for sweeping democracy reform, independent redistricting, a right to vote, ending political corruption by exposing dark money and
Mhm.
creating a public financing system. All of that is
And
because of my
actually, I think that
experience.
your mention of dark money is really interesting to me because I also noticed you getting some criticism online for affiliation with PACs and connections to, certain controversial in the industry, aggressive fundraising organizations. And I thought it was interesting because I also noticed you had a background, really fighting for End Citizens United and almost and organizing against PACs. So can you clarify your position on that? Are you
Yeah.
being fairly criticized, unfairly? Explain the confusion to people.
It- yeah, thanks for asking. So I helped start a group called End Citizens United in 2015. And the reason that I helped start this group and led it until I stepped down to be Katie Porter's chief of staff in
Hmm.
2019 was because there was no group working in the political electoral space that was dedicated to electing Democrats who were going to make anti-corruption, money in politics reform a top priority. And I had just the candidate I was working for, he's a member of Congress, Brad Schneider on the North Shore of Chicago. He lost in really the first full midterms post Citizens United decision, and lost because several millions of dollars came in at the end from one billionaire, and we lost by 2,000
Mhm.
votes. And that exposed for me firsthand what we are dealing with in a new campaign finance system that gives corporations and the wealthiest so much power, and that there was no group on our side that was helping defend people like my boss who support campaign finance reform. And so our idea in creating ECU was we wanted it to be grassroots funded. We didn't
Okay.
accept contributions over $5,000. And so to be successful and be grassroots funded, really rewrote the book on how digital fundraising works. And some people didn't like that,
Okay.
and upset some people in the space that we were deciding to not go after just large dollar contributions, but be grassroots funded. And it's aggressive fundraising tactics that are now like pretty normal. But we were on the early side of pioneering some of those, and have been criticized for
I
it.
guess the main criticism is that a lot of these orgs sort of, these are the people sending you those texts every day for $5 and they spend like 60+% of their budget funneling back into these fundraising mechanisms.
Yeah,
And you think
and
that's a
that's
necessity of the times?
well, I mean, that's just untrue, though.
Okay.
Any organization, NCIS, United, or others I've ever worked for, nothing, no more than 25 or 30% of all overhead was spent on fundraising, and that's pretty normal for an organization. But
Hmm.
I mean, it's all publicly disclosed through open
Sure.
secrets. You can look at the, I think ECU spent 75
And
million
Mothership,
dollars.
though, as
Mother is a fundraising firm,
yes.
that my husband is one of the founders of.
Hmm.
But ECU, they don't do ECU's fundraising anymore, as
Yeah.
far as I know. I haven't worked there for a while, but my husband and I have always kept very strict separation between our professional and personal lives. And I have never worked there. I have never directed business to his company. They do not work on our campaign, and ethically, we have just always kept that really separate.
Is it reason, by the
But
way, just out of curiosity, I think this is a
uh
question that comes up for so many people in the space because you work in politics, you meet other people that work in a different angle of politics. Is it a fair thing for people to bring up or no?
I think that any question is fair in a campaign like this, because I think primaries are about making sure that we're putting forward candidates that represent our party and our values the right way,
Hmm.
and also that they're the most electable candidate. So I think all questions are
Because
fair,
people
but
I
I
know have asked
also
about Susan Collins' husband's
yeah, yeah.
decisions and
I think
investments as well. Obviously, it's
yeah,
a little different since she's the
yeah, I
member,
think that
but
they're no, it's a great question. And I think they are fair questions to ask. I think I would appreciate if people like also listen to I'm
to the
glad that you're asking
answer.
the question, because
Yes,
you'll
I
notice
think that's
like
fair.
they don't let me sort of answer that there is no misdealing here. There is no corruption.
Okay.
We have I'm really proud of the work that my husband does, although I'm not involved with it at all.
Yeah.
And Susan Collins also says that she has a wall of separation between what his financial interests are as lobbyists, and that gets a bit murky to me when he lobbies her office for his clients, and maybe they're not.
Right.
Maybe there's nothing wrong going on, but I think that it's fair to ask those things, and
Last question
have
then on the funding and
transparency.
stuff. What's your position on AIPAC? Should Democratic candidates be taking money from AIPAC at this point, and are you?
I'm not taking any money from AIPAC. I would also say, and this has been brought up by Graham Platner and in the
Hmm.
primaries. I mean, I think have enough experience in politics to know, AIPAC has endorsed and is funding Susan Collins, and they really would like her to be reelected. So it's not like AIPAC is offering support to me or to Graham. I would reject it because I think that there's a tremendous amount of distrust right now among Democratic primary voters that the money that AIPAC has put into our political system has affected our priorities when it comes to foreign aid to
Hmm.
Israel, and that I believe that the only way to truly prove to a voter that you are voting and prioritizing policies in their best interest and for our country's best interest is to remove any perception of corruption or misdealing. And so I would not take that money. I do also still support aid to Israel,
Okay.
and so but I would not want
So can you,
any
that's another
voter
thing
to
that I
think
think
that
came
I
up
yeah.
when I was trying to sort of solve the puzzle of why isn't this guy leading this race? I saw a bunch of, especially Plattner supporters, it seems like, suggest that your position and Janet Mills' position on the Israel-Gaza conflict was one of the things driving their support for Plattner. I saw that over the summer you were supportive of Senator King sort of saying that we should pause aid
Yeah.
to Israel given what's going on there. So you just said that you do support aid to Israel. What's your position on it? What was your position on it? What's the
Yeah,
earliest
yeah.
that you said something about it?
Yeah, so I support conditional conditions on the continuation of aid to Israel, and right off the bat said that I support Bernie Sanders' amendments before the ceasefire in Gaza on restricting offensive military weapons to Israel until this war ends, and it's an issue that I have been working on since college. I founded a chapter in Amnesty International in college and have been advocating for a two-state solution my whole life. I was actually scheduled to be on a flight to go to Israel the week after October 7th to be a witness and help observe the pro-democracy protests against Benjamin Netanyahu that were taking place. So it's an issue that I know the nuances, the politics of it very well. I also have a deep appreciation for the need for the United States to be promoting democracy and human rights abroad with our allies and our adversaries. And I think there was some on the left who were antagonistic or voiced opposition to me because I am I've been reticent to use the word genocide.
Okay.
That I have a reason for
Would you use
that,
it
which
now or?
I have said that I'm reports that have come out from the UN and others that are experts on genocide would imply that some of Israel's actions would qualify as genocidal. I still avoid using it. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu has committed war crimes. I think that
Okay.
they have engaged in indiscriminate warfare. The civilian loss of life in this Gaza war is unacceptable, and we need to say that very clearly. But I want to go back to the word genocide. I've hesitated on it because I'm also seeing a real rise of anti-Semitism in the United States. My husband is Jewish,
Okay.
and the acts of violence towards Jewish Americans very much is connected to the language that we use. And I focus more on what are the solutions that I, as a senator, and what Congress can do to help end this conflict and bring relief to the people of Gaza. Yeah.
And I guess the pushback from the left on that is that why should using a term, as you said, that comes from, several bodies that have deliberated on this be limited by, another bad thing happening here, which is the rise of anti-Semitism? And do you see them as like, I guess, can only certain negative words be used to describe what Israel is doing then? Or how do you sync that up? Because I hear what you're saying on the impact of the focus on this issue.
Yeah, I think that Benjamin Netanyahu and some of the far right in Israel want us to be having a debate here in the United States about the word genocide or not, because
Okay.
it takes away from having the debate of what conditions do we need to place on arms sales and aid to Israel, and what do we need to be doing as a country to make sure that we are using every tool we have to end this conflict in Gaza
Okay.
and bring about a lasting peace here. So I also think that some people don't understand that it would be a huge deal for the United States Congress to designate what's going on in Gaza a genocide officially.
Mhm.
There could be consequences to that of U.S. citizens that have served in the IDF. Do they get prosecuted? So there's
It's a
you know
very
it
nuanced
has.
answer you're giving, and I guess, there's
Yeah.
a lack of nuance in our politics today. Is that a message that has been resonating as you go out on the campaign trail? And especially, I think, as some of the things happening in Maine have been boiled down to these reductive national media narratives, are you going to be able to win over those voters that really care about this issue and have shown that time and time again?
Yeah, I truly do. I mean, it gets brought up. We've been doing town halls across the state
Okay.
of Maine since we launched this campaign, and I am asked about it. And I explain that I support Bernie Sanders legislation to put conditions on this, that I do not accept money from AIPAC, and give my story of the work that I have done to
Mhm.
advance human rights and democracy for the Palestinian people. And that I think people understand that they know who I am and the voice I would be in the Senate,
Okay.
and agree with that. So. But
And I guess
I'm not going
speaking
to win
of
everybody over. I understand
Of
that.
course. And speaking of anti-Semitism, I do want to get back to Graham Platner's tattoo. And also, you're a member of the LGBT community, and I know Platner also came under fire for some pretty bigoted Reddit posts and slur usage. There's been a lot of conversation, though, in the Democratic Party about whether you want to call it forgiveness or ditching purity politics or not holding ourselves to a moral standard that Republicans aren't. How should we go forward thinking of that? Did you support or are you happy with the outcome of Jay Jones being elected in Virginia as the attorney general there after some texts on his part, promoting violence? And I guess, how do you reconcile all that conversation right now?
Yeah, I'm a deep believer in the need for more grace and forgiveness in our politics, and that we need to give people a path forward for redemption, to change, and that people deserve second chances. I think that's going to be instrumental in the eventual post-Trump politics of our country. We will need to rebuild two healthy pro-democracy parties that can compete in free and fair elections, and we've got to move forward. That being said, my issue with Graham Platner's the disclosure of these comments are there's several things. One is that from the earliest reporting on CNN, he defended the use of a homophobic slur that he used in relation to Ted Nugent. I don't like Ted Nugent. I think he's an idiot. I think that he is spreads conspiracy theories, is pro-Trump, but that does not excuse the use of a homophobic slur in describing him. And several days later, he made his own Instagram post saying that not all my Reddit posts are bad. Here's an example of me defending the LGBT community and serving in the military, of which he says the F slur. That's to me somebody who does not understand why that homophobic language is entirely unacceptable and offensive and threatening. He also used a very racist comment in asking why black people don't tip. And when he was on Pod Save America disclosing the tattoo, he was also asked about this, and he doubles down on the question. He says, I really wanted to know the answer to that question, and seems to not understand how it is racist and offensive. And I don't know how I can be expected to vote for somebody to be the U.S. senator who doesn't seem to quite understand what racism it is. This is the application of a single negative stereotype that you may have experienced, but ascribing it to an entire race of people. So I'm willing to forgive and move on with Graham, but I will have to know that he understands what he's done wrong and what he's going to do differently to prove to us that he is going to be a different person. And I don't see that. He has really yet to really walk back and excuse his commentary about political violence. I mean,
So
I don't know
it
if you.
sounds like you don't think he's grown the way that he
I
says.
don't I'm an ardent opponent of political violence, that we need to settle our differences through free and fair elections, and
Hmm.
that we need our political leaders most of all to denounce political violence and keep supporters back from believing they need to engage in that violence. He has recently been advocating for that and has not walked it back. And to me, again, I want to give you a second chance, but I need you to be truthful with us.
Hmm.
And the tattoo is sort of the final thing that made me put out this statement, which is I believe him. He didn't know what this tattoo meant when he got it. I do. I'll give him that. But we have evidence of people who say as early as 12 years ago, he knew what this tattoo
Hmm.
was. His political director, who left the campaign, says he knew what
Yeah,
that
can you say
tattoo
so?
was.
Four senior people from his team have left. What is your campaign's interpretation of what's going on there? I know a lot of people are trying to figure out the puzzle.
Well, as someone who's worked on campaigns before, it's never a good sign. And to me, this connects to the tattoos, which I believe Graham is lying still today, that he did not know what this tattoo was until the day before he went on Pod Save America, because we one of his close friends said he knew about it several
Yeah.
years ago. That's not someone associated with the campaign, but just a personal friend of his. So all of this evidence, Graham is saying they're all liars. I would also say that I personally heard rumors about this in September. And so you're telling
Is
me I knew about
And
Graham's
do
tattoo being a
people
Nazi
do the
totenkopf
voters
before he
in
did?
Maine care? Because I think on the racism about tipping, that comment, some other things, I think the response, at least from some on the left, has been, well, this is not what Maine voters care about. It's not resonating. This is a national story. Is that
I
a fair shake for Maine
No,
voters?
I think that this is another damage being done to our state. Is it's awful to hear that people nationally somehow perceive us as being okay with Nazi insignia. Not just Nazi insignia. This is a symbol that was used by the SS for the people who were in charge of running the death camps. And so I no, it is unacceptable. But what's I think fully unacceptable is lying about it. If you wanted to come clean and move
Hmm.
on and tell us you're a different person, do not lie to us
Right.
when you're doing that. So I think that the more that voters absorb and read about the situation, we will see declining support for him as a candidate. And we have a long primary process where we have the ability to ask these questions and for voters to study which candidates are in this primary and to move on. But in contrast to the Jay Jones situation, which I think is a really difficult proposition for voters, is we're in a very tenuous time for our country and our
Hmm.
state. And there is danger in putting a Republican aligned with Donald Trump into
Yep.
the office of Attorney General. And so Jay Jones, as it seems, made a stupid mistake, said things he should not have said. He regrets it, has apologized, and voters have to weigh and did ultimately decide that they see the threat posed by a Donald Trump backed candidate as AG a bigger problem. In Maine right now, we've got 7 months before the primary, and so we've got lots of time to make sure
Right.
that we aren't facing the proposition of a Graham with these flaws, which I think are also very difficult to make him a viable candidate against Susan Collins.
And two quick questions to end. Thank you so much for your time and your candor. I know these were sort of, pretty follow-up
No,
based
it's
questions,
great
but
conversation.
I think people will walk away really understanding some more dynamics. But you did work for Katie Porter. You were her chief of staff, so you worked very closely with her. Obviously, she's made some waves in her bid for governor with some old videos circulating about how she's treated staff. Women like Amy Klobuchar have faced similar criticism, and yet it does seem like there have to, as you know, some from somebody that's been on the Hill for a while, men act the same way. Is there sexism there? Is the criticism fair? What's one difference or takeaway from working for that office, in how you would lead your office if elected?
Yeah, I am a Katie is a dear friend. I consider her a mentor. So I talk to her, gosh, almost every week on the campaign. We stay in close touch. I think that that people should not be judged in their worst moments. And I remember around that period of time when that video occurred, and we had just come off an incident of violence at a town hall. Actually, somebody had disrupted a town hall, and and so she reacted in a way that is not acceptable, and she has apologized for that. Apologized to the staffer, and I felt really badly about how she had responded, and also always strives to be better. Like that this is not who I am. This is not the leadership that we have in this office, and this isn't how we should treat other people. And so I know what type of a leader she is. But I would also say that she has really high standards and is demanding and tough, but that's because she has a lot of responsibility in the work that she does. I know she goes into the office and goes into a committee hearing room every day, thinking about what she can do for people that really need the government to deliver. And Katie and I both come from middle class, lower income families. We know what the government at its best can do
Hmm.
to deliver and solve for people. And that weight is what I think sometimes
So
it
no key
leads to
difference
being
in how you
tough.
would lead your office that comes to mind,
Oh,
which is totally fine.
I
Just curious.
key difference is how we would lead the office. Um, well, I would I have never spoken to a staff member
Okay.
like that. I don't
Fair
I would say
enough.
just language,
Yes.
no tolerance for using swear words or
Okay.
speaking in a disrespectful way. And so
And
that would be a big difference. But I'm also proud when I was chief of staff, we won an award for the most innovative congressional office on Capitol Hill. And so there's things I would do differently as the member, yes. But
things you
all
did
in
the
all,
same
I
too.
think it was a
Yeah.
great office. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. And then last question, I do want to hear how you're going to win this primary or what's the plan, like specifically, what's the strategy? How do you get in here?
Yeah. So Maine has ranked choice voting. So well, this could possibly be the first competitive Senate primary in our country's history that uses that. And what we've seen is the media has, to your point earlier, really presented this as a two-way race. I think they like this conflict between an older establishment Schumer-backed candidate and against a fringe.
A tale as old as time.
Yeah, and so I really view us in between those things. I have experience in government, in politics, but I'm a reformer and I'm progressive. I view Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren as the type of Democratic leaders that I most align with, and we are doing the work. We've had over 40 town halls and public events meeting voters. We have over 3,000 donors to our campaign in Maine, and we are breaking through. I mean, I think our name ID already with Democratic primary voters is of above 50%. And when you ask voters their second choice, we are in the UNH poll, we're very low on the first question, but I think we're up to 17% on the site. So we're making progress. I think the goal here is that we just need the media to cover that there are three candidates here running viable campaigns that have endorsements we've raised $3.5 million. We have a campaign staff. No, I'm proud to say no one has quit our campaign since we launched in April.
Okay.
And we're working really hard. And being a middle class kid, I don't think anything is given to you. You earn it. And I would not expect anything to be easy or given to me in this race. It will be through doing the work.
Wonderful answer. Thank you so much for your time, and I guess we'll see you back on the trail.